So your 50s really start to change things financially. I think at every different stage of your life, there's different things that, become important or not important to you. And so today I thought I'd talk about 8 different things that kind of shift when you're in your 50s. And these are things that probably you're thinking about, so at probably any stage, right? I thought this would be important to hear because even if you're in your 20s or your 30s or maybe even your 40s, eventually you'll get to 50 and these things will start to become important to you. So being aware, you might be able to adjust and react differently, in those other stages. So here's the 8 things that I thought really start to change when you hit your 50s. So the first thing financially is retirement really does start to come in the back of your mind. I think in your 20s and your 30s, you're hopefully saving and investing, or your kids are there, or you're getting married. There's all these things that come into play. But when you start to move into your 50s, retirement starts to feel really real. You start to think about potentially, one day eventually getting out of the workforce. I love my job, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to be there forever. I know I'm not. So it becomes real and you start to think about that and you start to look at your financials around that. So that's the first thing that kind of pops up. The second thing that obviously comes into play when you turn 50 is catch up contribution. So hopefully you are saving and investing. And if you are one of those people that is probably saving aggressively, you can take advantage of those catch up contributions. At 50, you can do the 401k contributions or the catch ups. At 55, I believe it is, your health savings accounts. If you have one of those, you can actually do a catch up as well. So all of that is there to help propel your financial future. So those things kind of come into play. The third thing you do start to think about a little bit is healthcare. Not a huge concern, I think, but you start to think at least you want to be healthy, right? I mean, that's the biggest thing. Without your health, all the money in the world probably doesn't matter. So how do you eat better? How do you exercise better? Those are the things that you think of. And again, really around that healthcare aspect is if you do have one of those health savings accounts, which I know a lot of people today do, taking advantage of that triple tax benefit can really help. Well, I'm not in I don't have a high deductible plan today. I did for many years. One of the things that I really appreciated many, many years ago when I had it was somebody actually told me to not use it. And I thought it was such a weird concept because I was putting money in, let's say it was $3,000 at the time. And then during the year, if I needed contacts for somebody or I went to the doctors or whatever, I pulled out the $3,000. And I thought it was a great way to not pay taxes on it. And then I used it, of course. But the person really taught me a valuable lesson there on no, if financially you can do it, you want to pull that money tax free, put it in the account, and let it grow. And obviously, these past few years have been really great financially in the stock market. So you invest the money. And when you get a 15%, a 20% on top of it, again, you are investing it, so it could go down. And I have seen years where, it's decreased a little bit. But, and I don't have the exact figures, but I'm sure I'm 50% growth over the many years that I've had it. So now I have a nest egg of, a sizable 5-figure number in my health savings account that I can use later on. So great thing to do, especially when you're in your 50s. Take advantage of that catch up if you can. So if these things resonate with you, and you like this, hit like and subscribe. I think I'm going to do another one of these. What are you thinking about in your 20s? What are you thinking about in your 30s? What are you thinking about in your 40s? And now again, I'm in my early 50s. So these are the 8 things that I thought, again, if this is interesting, curious to hear if I don't mention one of your 8 topics, throw it in the comments. Again, hit like and subscribe. So thank you. So the next one that comes into play, number 4, is risk tolerance. So I'm in my early 50s. Hasn't I think, hit me too much, but I think it is something that's starting to weigh on me. Yes, if I have a $500,000 in my investment accounts and the market goes down 40%, today I'm not too worried about it. But what if I get into my 58, 59 age period? So while I'm probably at a 90-10 equity to bonds, it is something that I'm considering and trying to play that in and how to rebalance my portfolio a little bit to be a little bit more conservative. So while I don't like to do that, I know that's the right decision financially, because the last thing I want to do is go into my early 60s and see a 40% drop. That would be pretty hard to handle. So the next thing is income planning. So, you're not just looking at your investment accounts, but you're thinking about all of your accounts. The health savings account, the Social Security. So, one thing I tell everybody to do is go out to ssa.gov and grab their report, especially in their 50s, where they can see, what if I took the money at 62? What if I took it at 64 or 65 or 67 or even all the way up to 70? So, using that money as a floor, because the one great thing about Social Security is it's kind of indexed for inflation, and you can take advantage of that. And if that can cover the majority or all of your basic living expenses at the time of your retirement, then maybe you don't need a huge nest egg. But, maybe if that isn't the number that you're expecting, maybe you need to save more to make up the difference. So I think it's a really important thing to look at. So the timing, the income planning, how money's coming in, starts to become important. Obviously not doing too much about it right now, but I'm putting it into my thoughts and plans. So number 6, tax planning. So this is actually one that I'm really starting to think about. Haven't done it too much about it because, again, when you're in your 50s, you're usually potentially at your highest income in your working career. So from a federal tax rate, you're also at your highest federal tax rates. And the one thing that I feel like I really missed out on was Roth. So, when I first started out, really Roth accounts weren't there. It wasn't part of my 401k. I didn't even think about IRAs at that point because I was putting all my money into my 401k. So, taking advantage of that would have been helpful. So I think if I look at my numbers and, I do run a net worth statement every year, between my health savings account and Roth, I might be 5%. I mean, maybe another 5% in a brokerage account, and then over 90% or close to 90% is all pre-tax. So that tax planning and how am I going to draw that out with RMDs and, starts to become a thought process. Again, at 53 or almost 53, it's not something I can really take advantage now. I mean, sure, depending again on your income coming in and out each year, maybe you want to pay the tax today and put more in Roth. But it is something that I'm trying to think about, but not really be able to take too much advantage of those things. Number 7 is an interesting one that I wrote down, which was my retirement vision. And, really, what do I see retirement turn into? Obviously, with a spouse, you should be talking about that. So where are we going to live, right? What's our days going to look like? Again, not putting too much the thought process into that. I think as I turn into my later 50s, I'll put more of an effort into that. But I am thinking about it, thinking of potentially of downsizing now, even in my early 50s, to kind of save up even more money to put in my investments. I've got a nice house and not, there's only 2 of us here 80-95% of the time. So really don't need to be in a large house at this point. What's our friends going to look like? Those type of things. It starts to think about. And one thing I really want to do, but haven't yet been able to think about it, is, what's that normal burn rate going to be when I'm in retirement? Because I think that'll help plan out either the withdrawal strategies or something like that. So that is why potentially downsizing and getting into a smaller house, maybe with a smaller footprint, that allows me to think through what our future budget would be. Today, I feel like it could be all over with different expenses and stuff like that. So And the last thing that sort of comes into focus in your early 50s, and I know when I talk with it with other people, roughly around the same age, is the contingency. What if things happen? As you're in your 50s, you've worked for many many years. Hopefully, you've saved, you invested, you may have your own house and stuff like that. But what happens when a job loss comes into play? You know, just see it recently, actually. Amazon laid off some people, UPS, I think it was, or different organizations. So, how are you going to adjust with those contingencies? I think that really does take, some stress into your life and how you're going to move things around. Maybe also your parents' situations are popping up with different health concerns and stuff like that. So, those things come into play. So thinking of how you're going to adjust and handle those things also come up. So that was my 8. I'm curious what your thoughts are. Do these things pop into your mind as well if you're in your 50s? What am I missing? Am I missing more around health? Am I missing more around, just the day-to-day stuff? Curious to get your perspective. And again, if you like this and you find this interesting, curious also if you could, right? Maybe throw your thoughts in. What were your financial concerns really through your 20s, maybe your 30s, through your 40s? Like to see that. Maybe I'll include that in when I do my own. Maybe I'm going to miss something early, so I'd like to get your perspective as well. So, hope you find this interesting and see you in the next one. Thank you.